Pleasure this evening. I prepared myself to talk about the afternoon. Prepped us. And I want to elaborate on the fact that I'm introducing someone that I've never met, as was the case last year where we did this on Zoom. And this year it is my great pleasure to introduce someone whose work I admire very much because of my work in the history of how the arrival of Cortez in Mexico coincided with his recognition of what we will call here tonight heritage languages. Because on board the ship, it's a very sad story, was a woman who had been kidnapped from the coast of Mexico, what we now call Mexico, and she spoke several of the indigenous languages. And within Mexico at that time, there was basically a fundamental language policy, which was a way, of course, of collecting taxes. We're all familiar with that. And the issue is that when Cortez landed, he looked around and realized, oh my goodness. And he turned to this woman who had been kidnapped, Maria, who was on the ship. And that made all the difference in the way in which the first arrivals operated. I will not say succeeded. It seems to give them credit for doing some pretty horrendous things. But what is fascinating is that Maria, an indigenous speaker, was able to help establish what was fundamentally a language policy in central Mexico, particularly among what we now call the Otomi. And that policy then spread throughout central Mexico and later on into Zapotec and the areas of the Yucatan Peninsula. And the person we're honoring tonight with the Charles Ferguson Award, and many of you know that Charles, as a very young, and I would have said at the time, foolish man, left a position at Harvard University when he was quite young to come to Washington, fundamentally on a lark, to start the Center for Applied Linguistics. And he must have been, now Charles was much older than I, but he must have been at least not 30. And he established this policy. And it went on, not particularly successfully in Peru with Quechua and other languages, but the issue is that somehow Maria, the first indigenous arrival on the ship of Cortez, was able to set up with Cortez what I have called, perhaps liberally, a language policy. So that in a sense, one of the things that happened in the early days of Mexican history was that there was a heritage language operation. The idea was to keep both languages, in fact it turned out to be 3 to 4 languages operating. And it's my pleasure tonight to introduce someone I've never met, but I feel is a total soulmate, and that is María Carreira. And she is amazing. And I want to say just three things about her. For 30 years, she taught in Spanish linguistics, and that really mattered. And she has recently been selected as the executive director of the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. So we should all be elated because she will successfully be able to expand in some of the many ways that Roberto was pointing out, the work of dual, triple, and multiple languages. And that is her mission. And now that she will no longer be teaching, and I'm sure that she's not particularly anxious to take on the budget of the new organization, which is the Association for Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. But we want to recognize Maria as reflecting, as we end this evening, many of the values that we've talked about and that we all embrace. She is truly what I consider a pedagogue and a scholar. And for me, as someone who has been a teacher all my life, being a good pedagogue matters if you're going to be a good scholar. That you can't really be a true scholar if you're not also understanding the power of pedagogy and your sense of learning as a continuation. And so I recognize Maria, and I won't go through all the many accomplishments she has achieved, the latest, of course, being this new election, and I hope all of us will step forward to support her. You'll hear more from her and about her, I'm sure, and she will not be shy in reaching out to all of you to support her in her work with the Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. So this is, to my knowledge, the first time we've been able to embrace someone who is fully engaged in understanding heritage languages and the power of heritage language learning, heritage language promotion, all through everything from publications in newspapers to teaching to teacher education. So we reckon our responsibilities with you, Maria, and we welcome you, Maria Carreira, as this Ferguson.